Hey friends and book lovers, welcome back. Today's video, I am doing a somewhat spoiler-free review of A Shadow in the Ember. Now, this is a spin-off series to the From Blood and Ash series, and this is the first. Since I've done a lot of From Blood and Ash content on my channel because I was really enjoying that series, and I was like, I'm just gonna review the books and then review the latest one that came out, I think in March of this year. And then A Shadow in the Ember came out, which is the spin-off, and I was really excited about this. One of my anticipated releases for the fall, and I thought, you know what, I'll do a quick kind of spoiler-free review for those that have read all three of the From Blood and Ash books and aren't really sure if they should read this, because Gilded Bones, the third one in the From Blood and Ash series, was kind of disappointing. So I can't blame anyone who is kind of lukewarm or not very excited about any other books in this world or in this series by JLA, Jennifer L. Armentrout. But I was really hopeful for Shadow in the Ember to kind of redeem itself in terms of the story and like a bit of the writing and redundancies that we saw in Gilded Bones. And honestly, a bit of a review spoiler alert, this definitely was amazing. I think I ended up giving it 4.5 stars just because there was a couple things that I didn't love, but other than that, it's really amazing. I absolutely love this book. I'm excited for the rest of the books in this series. Just separate within the From Blood and Ash world, I think the Flesh and Fire series is probably going to be even better than From Blood and Ash, in my opinion. I love this first book and I can't wait for the sequel to come out, which isn't until fall 2022, and it's going to kill me to wait a year, but since authors love to do this to us, I will have to wait a year. The next one in the From Blood and Ash series, the fourth one, War of Two Queens, comes out in March, so I have less time to wait for that one, but still a little scared about that story. We'll see though. I'm very hopeful. So without further ado, let's jump into this book. So this book is about Sarah and Nyktos' love story. Sarah is Nyktos' consort, as we learn, and they have a significant role to play, and there are also ties to Poppy with these two. Nyktos, I don't know if I mentioned this before, is a primal and he's very powerful, and Poppy seems to have maybe some of his powers. So a lot of this is in Gilded Bones, so you probably already know the backstory, but just to give a quick overview, that's what this story is about. And now I'll jump into the review. So if you have been to any other review videos, you know that I go through general comments, world building, plot, characters, writing style, and just general enjoyability, which is obviously like a bias prompt. I mean, this review is gonna be biased, but that one's the most biased prompt of them all, so I will just jump right in. I did kind of give general comments before, so this will be the more specific points. I'm gonna start off with world building. Now, we go into this as a spin-off series, so we're already familiar with Poppy's world and with the gods and kind of the godlands in a very vague way. This story takes place in another country, which I think is part of the world that Poppy comes from, and we get to see a bigger glimpse of how the gods and the godlands are kind of set up, and we get a lot more insight into like who lives in the godlands, how things started, and it's a really great background. So this story helps world build all the things that are happening in From Blood and Ash that have taken maybe inspiration from the times where Sarah and Nyktos were living and how things were functioning. And even in their world, things are going awry. They're going askew because of other things that have happened even before Sarah and Nyktos' time. I don't know if she's gonna do another spin-off series and discuss the even earlier parts of the gods and the primals, but it's really interesting what you learn. And just for knowledge's sake, I was super interested in the world building, how the gods worked, how everything was tied together, how the relationships, the political courts and things like that. That said, there's a lot of different names and a lot of different courts to memorize. It can feel like a lot going into this. I know I was talking with a friend of mine who I was buddy reading this with, and she was like, oh, I wish we had like a character page or character like tree that we could just take a look at to see who's in what court and which gods do what. And I agree with her. Apart from the main gods, which we know what they do, it's really tough to keep track of all the other gods and what they do and who's in what court and who does what and who's good or bad or whatever you have. I do hope that in the next novel, at least in this series, we get that kind of character chart You don't often get that in the first novel because it can kind of be a spoiler, but hopefully in the second novel of this series, however many books there will be, we'll get kind of that character list, character tree to see how everyone is tied together. Don't know if that's possible, but fingers crossed that it will happen. So the plot for this was really interesting. It's really tied into the world building because you have to learn about the history of the gods and what happened to really understand From Blood and Ash, at least the next ones that we're told. So now I have a really good understanding. And the plot was a lot of discovery of those themes. We also have the romance theme with Sarah and Nyktos, and that was really well woven into the plot of the story. I feel like this fantasy romance plot had a lot of plot, but it had a lot of romance, and everything was very well woven. Like the romance was part of the plot and almost like essential to the plot in ways, and the plot was essential to the romance too. That was really interesting to me. It's a lot easier to read a novel where the romance fits seamlessly into the story and doesn't feel like kind of a cheaper add-on, and I really enjoyed that about A Shadow in the Ember. I thought that was really well done and everything just fit really well together. I will also say that the pacing in this novel was much better than Gilded Bones. Gilded Bones felt like really slow and then really rushed at parts, but for this I felt everything was very well paced. It was very action-packed. There was always action happening in the story. There was always like murderous things, fun conversations, fun comments, things around the corner that you weren't quite expecting. You have like kind of an in-your-face romantic moment in the beginning of the book, which I wasn't even expecting things that early, but nothing too heavy, just the right amount to have me like, oh, interesting, this is how we're going to start off the book, huh? So I really did enjoy the plot much more in this book than in the third book of From Blood and Ash. That takes me into the characters because I also enjoyed the characters almost more than From Blood and Ash. I love Poppy and Castile. They're very sweet and cute, but in this story, Nyktos and Sarah definitely like took my heart away. I love them. I love Nyktos, I love Sarah, and I love their relationship so much more. I think in the From Blood and Ash world, their relationship, their romance is my favorite so far, and them as individual characters are my favorite. Sarah and Poppy are very similar, and that's for good reason, though it's very striking and it's really obvious. There could have been a more subtle touch on the similarities between Sarah and Nyktos. They are very similar, and it is very obvious, and that is also pointed out in Gilded Bones that Sarah and Poppy are similar, so that's kind of like a, okay, we knew that was probably gonna happen. Again, I wish it was a little more subtle, but that's okay. All in all, it makes sense. I really think that Nyktos and Castile and the males are very different from each other, which of course that also makes sense. I don't know how she does it, but they all feel very different. I love Nyktos. He's probably my favorite male character right now in this universe, in this world. I think he's great. I think he's complex. You can see him warring with himself between like love and duty and all that stuff, and it's really interesting. He's definitely similar to other like book boyfriend heartthrobs, but different, and he's definitely like a new book boyfriend, I have to say. I really enjoy his character with Sarah's character and like their dynamic together, and I enjoy his dynamic with other side characters in the story as well. So those two characters were great. I enjoyed, again, the side characters. We see other species of characters in this. Now, obviously, if you read Gilded Bones, you know that there's other species. I loved seeing more of them in this book, and it was just so good. I really loved the characters in the plot. It was great. I do want to say, when discussing Sarah and Poppy and how I wish the touch was more subtle, is because their similarities are very obvious, like the same kind of sassy banter, the same rebellious attitude, the same like helpful bleeding heart attitude, and those are like the most striking traits. It's hard sometimes to find things that are dissimilar that make them like their own character. There are a few things. I definitely feel like Sarah is definitely her own woman. She's more independent. She's more like, you know, she knows who she is, whereas Poppy has always been sheltered and she's a little more naive and a little more like ungrounded. So there is that. But I do, again, I think my biggest thing with the characters was Poppy and Sarah being similar. Though I understand, I wish it was done a little more subtle, less in our face. Now, the fourth thing is the writing style. I typically like Jennifer's writing style. I don't have a huge problem with it. I did find that in Gilded Bones, she was super redundant, and that took away from the story. And we also lost one of the characters' kind of identities in the story, which I was really turned off by. However, in this story, it's a lot better. The pacing is a lot better. I feel like the writing style is a lot more cleaned up. Everything is more well thought out, and there isn't extra fluff just for there to be extra fluff or to make the book longer. I did feel like in comparison for Gilded Bones, there's a lot of content in that book that could be cut out and it feels like it's in there and it just makes the book longer. It doesn't really add to anything, unfortunately, but in Shadow in the Ember, I feel like everything's there, everything's justified, everything weaves together beautifully, and I really enjoyed that. There is still the kind of issue that some folks have, and sometimes it pulls me out of the story too, where we have like modern language in a very kind of older type of medieval fantasy type setting, and that kind of pulls me out of the story a little bit too when I find that the language is very similar to the language that we use and the kind of slang syntax that we also tend to use. So that might pull you out of the story if you have a problem with that. In the From Blood and Ash books, that still happens in these books or in this Flesh and Fire series so far, and I think obviously that will just continue to be the case. It's something that I can accept. It does bother me a little bit. I can definitely accept it though, but I know that other people find it really obvious and really difficult to navigate, so I just want to put that out there for folks where it will bother you. So the last one is enjoyability, and of course, as you already know, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4.5 stars, as I've said before, and overall, just like a really fun time. I'll definitely be rereading this next year before the second one comes out, just to refresh my memory, and also because it's just a really good time, so why wouldn't I want to read it again? I think if you like fantasy romance, and you like the From Blood and Ash series, but you were kind of let down by Gilded Bones, this one is definitely one that you should read. I think it'll redeem the series and rejuvenate interest. And what I'm really hoping is that the next one in the From Blood and Ash series lives up to the standard of Shadow in the Ember, because it was just really fun and great to read. I hope that the plot and romance being so intertwined and so well woven continues in the From Blood and Ash series and also in this Flesh and Fire series, because that was really fun to read and it felt very impactful and purposeful and it felt very well thought out. I love a book that feels well thought out, that I feel surprised by, that I feel that there is some sort of ingenuity behind it and just really great planning, and this is what this one felt like. Everything just tied in together at the end, so I really appreciated that about this book and it was super enjoyable. That's it for this review. I hope that you found it helpful. I hope that if you're on the fence about giving this book a shot, that you'll do so and you'll give it a shot and see how you feel. Especially if you were disappointed by Gilded Bones, I definitely think that you should give this a shot and try it out, because it was really great. If you have read this and you have opinions on it, definitely leave them in the comments down below. I would love to hear them. I don't know a ton of people that have read this. I've only read this with Kristen and I know that she really enjoyed it, so we had a great time buddy reading it together. But if you have read it and you enjoyed it or you didn't enjoy it, definitely leave your comments below. And I will also leave my vlog / review of Gilded Bones in the description and in the cards so that you guys can take a look at that and see if you agree or disagree for that one as well. And that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please click that like button, and if you like this content and you want to see more from me, please don't hesitate to subscribe.